that you can connect later and just start watching. So on the call today from Chicago Title, we have most of our sales team, including Linda Federico Johnson, Robin Albert, Lisa Williams, and Val Allen. Brad Fisher could not be with us today, but he is also very familiar with the material and can answer any questions if Brad happens to be your rep later on. And our presenters today are Christy Kutka and Loveneet Baines, escrow officers with Team Kutka. I'm just going to go through a couple preliminaries and then let them take it away. First of all, reminding you to let all of your clients know at the time that you either take the listing or get the accepted offer that we have a start in here mobile deposit available for the buyers. Right now, that's only for buyers earnest money deposit funds, and we're looking to expand that so they can save themselves a trip into our branch to do their earnest money deposit and deposit it from their phone in seconds. We also have the In Here program, which has a couple of different parts. The screen that you're seeing is for agents, for buyer and seller agents. It is one-stop shopping through a web or app, where you can get notifications about milestones in the transaction, as well as pop in and see what's going on and access documents after closing. And before I jump into our agenda, I just want to add one note. We also are using a Start In Here digital package that we send to all buyers and sellers. It is the most secure way of having your clients share their confidential information with us, as well as set us on the right path to the transaction. So be certain to let your clients know that they will be receiving those digital opening packages. We learned last month at a sales rally that people who are using that platform to get our wire instructions and share their information with us, that as of right now, there is zero wire fraud on those files, which with the volume of wire fraud, which we'll share at the end of this presentation, that is a good thing. And if you have any questions about Start In Here mobile deposit, Start In Here, or the In Here app, please be sure to ask your rep, ask me, or check in with our lovely instructors. So today we are going to be covering what we need up front to get going with the escrow, why the prelim is the map to closing, what causes flat tires, blowouts, and engine trouble, detours and route changes, three-way restless passengers can cause delays, and the critical last mile of the transaction closing, as well as a Q&A to answer all your questions. Again, please be sure to put them in the chat and we will get to them as we can. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to our amazing instructors, Christy Kutka and Loveneet Baines.
Good morning.
Morning, everyone.
Okay, so my name's Christy Kutka. I'm Loveneet Baines, and we have been working together for 7 years now.
7 years in 5 days. This is my 7-year anniversary is coming up.
Look at you.
And Christy just celebrated her 30-year anniversary.
Yes, okay, go ahead, say it.
Longer than I've been alive.
Yeah, she likes to tell people that. It hurts my feeling. My one feeling left, and she just decides to destroy it on a regular basis. So.
She's fine.
Yeah, she's fine. Everybody's fine. So, you know, we've been doing this a minute. So the good news is that we have a little bit of information to provide to you guys.
So we like to think of all of the people involved in the escrow. We are all getting on a bus. That's the analogy that we've been using lately.
We like to drive the bus.
Yeah.
Okay, we're in charge. So don't fool yourselves in thinking that you guys are in charge. We really think that we're in charge. So whatever.
So people on the bus, we have our buyers, our sellers, the lenders, the agents, all of the vendors that we're going to be paying for through escrow. So the pest company, the roof company, the NHD people, the solar companies. Solar gets to sit in the back of the bus.
We don't like them. They stink. So they're back of the bus.
Yeah.
So
When you open a transaction with us, there's only a couple of pieces of information that we need in order to make sure that our ride through the escrow is very smooth. Whenever we send out an escrow number, we will request your customer's contact information so that we can reach them if they.
Okay, little sidebar. Contact information means cell phone number and email address. Okay, that's really important for the rest of the stuff, the rest of the ride, the rest of the bus ride.
And commission breakdown and any TCs, if you have someone that is going to be helping you with your file, include them on your opening email, and the lender's information. That way we can all be on the same page all throughout the transaction and be able to give each other updates.
So that's, that's kind of where we start. So once we get the open order, the bus, we could load the bus with all of our people here. We want to know some basic, anything that you guys might have information about, we want to know what the luggage is. We want to know what the baggage is that we're going to be carrying throughout this transaction. So
do you have someone who's going through a divorce? Are there people who have passed away that are in title? Is anyone not speaking to each other? Do you have a divorce situation where the couple is not amicable? Other things that we'd like to know about is what's happening with the solar panels. Are they being transferred? Is the owner taking them off the roof and taking them with them to the next property? Is the seller or buyer going to purchase the panels? Later on, I can tell you guys a little story about an incident we just recently had where
this week.
Yes,
this week
with solar panels.
Yeah, no problem.
Is anybody going to be leaving the country, and is the property held in the name of a trust? So all of these items are really important for us to know about, or for you to talk about when you go on to the listing appointments. And make sure reach out to your escrow officer or to one of the sales reps or to our customer service if you have any sort of questions about who you should be speaking to and who should be in title on the property. If you ever have any feelings that you're not talking to the right person, if your gut says something's not right,
9 times out of 10,
your gut is probably correct.
Yeah, follow your gut. It's telling you that for a reason. So
if we have anyone who is deceased in title and they own the property with the other tenant as joint tenants, we just need a certified death certificate in order to clear their name off the record. If there's a trust situation where a trustee has passed away and the home is held in the name of the trust, you're going to want to collect the trust papers from your client. If someone says, oh, hey, I can sign for Christy's trust.
Don't believe them.
You can't believe
them. I know. We like them, but we can't believe anybody anymore. We have to have the information that backs up what is really going to be happening through the transaction. It is not a problem for you to call your escrow officer, your customer service rep, your sales rep to get the right information. It's not a problem. It's not an inconvenience. Where the problem happens is when you don't gather this information in the beginning, and then about, 10 days down the road, you realize that your contract was not executed by the correct person. And it's very embarrassing for you. Let's not be embarrassed. Let's be happy on the bus. So,
and with trust, there's times where people will end up making changes to their trust agreement. Maybe one child thinks that they were supposed to be the trustee, but there's actually 4 people who are the trustee, or vice versa. So it's always good to collect those trust papers. It is not your job to review the trust papers. You don't even have to collect them, though. You can even say, hey, I'm going to have my title company reach out to you so that they can gather these documents to make sure that we are executing our listing agreement and the contract correctly, so that it's smooth sailing.
So once we get all of our baggage dialed in, what we're going to do is we're going to get out our roadmap. So our roadmap is called a preliminary title report. Our preliminary report shows everything that is currently of record. If we have a fully executed contract and a preliminary report, guess what? We got some good information. So
the title report gives details of, again, it's our roadmap. So it'll show us who is the owner of record. It'll show us the legal description of the property, if there's any property taxes that are outstanding, if there's delinquent taxes, there's disclosures about supplemental taxes. If there's any easements in regards to, you know, someone can access your property, there's a road easement, there's public utility easements, landscaping, things like that. CC&Rs, covenants, conditions, and restrictions. So if you live in a homeowners association, you're more than likely going to see something like that. So there's lots of items on the prelim that will stay on the final title policy. We will have a couple of items that will be and end up getting removed. So an example of that would be a seller's mortgage. That's not something that the buyer is going to want to take on. So the document that you'll see that's recorded is called a deed of trust. You'll also see documents like a financing statement or a notice for solar companies. There can be statement of information requirements. If there is a seller who has a very common name, like a John Smith, there's hundreds of John Smiths in Fresno County. So sometimes we need extra information in order to clear their names of any liens or judgments. Again, so that we can proceed on the road and get to our destination closing.
So what we try to avoid, but sometimes you just can't avoid, engine problems. So our engine problems they can be a pain in the butt, but we can avoid some of these engine problems too. Things that we see are
there's times where people are deceased, but they don't hold title correctly. So if there's two people in title, for example, if me and Christy were entitled together and it was just our names on the deed.
Are you gonna kill me off?
No, I'm not gonna kill you off. I
Don't
promise.
you kill me. There we go.
If both of our names are in title, but there's no vesting behind our names, we're not holding title as joint tenants, then it's automatically assumed that it is tenants in common, which means that if I were to pass away, my interest would have to go through probate,
Nice
and
save.
the same for Christy.
Nice
Yes,
save.
I can die first.
Thank you.
So when we see those types of things, that's where it can cause a delay in the transaction and the clients would have to go through probate. So again, another reason why it's very important to make sure that we know who all the parties are that are in title, and if someone has passed away, we want to make sure that there is a way to clear their name from the record.
Yeah, and then another thing that we have is bankruptcy. You know, we got to deal with those kind of things, and unfortunately, there's some paperwork that goes along with it, and we would be able to gather that information. Again, you know, backing up just one quick second, if you feel like when you're just sitting down with a listing agreement or a listing conversation, you know what? Have us do a spec read. Have us do some preliminary work. If you hear of anything, like you hear about dead people, you hear about bankruptcy, the next one is missing sellers or old loans. If you hear about any of those things, let's talk about them. We can talk about them before we actually get on the road, before we actually have a buyer that's involved.
And there's been several transactions that we've handled where a lot of the clearing of title work we've been able to do it on the front end before we even get on the road. So what happens there is we will get the title report in and we'll forward it on to you. We also look at it and we'll start asking questions. If you see a name on there that is someone that you have not been speaking with in regards to listing the home, then obviously we have a problem. So getting that information up front definitely does help us. And we've had a couple transactions where the owners of the property are not findable. We can't locate them anywhere. And with those people, those transactions, unfortunately, we've had two recently, actually not too long ago, where they had to cancel. They couldn't find the owner. The other one is if there's old loans on the title report. Old loans can be cleared, but they can take some time. We do a lot of research on our end. We have a processing department that helps us as well. There's paperwork that has to be filed with the county when a loan gets paid off. And back in the day, for my time.
I like to tell her about the good old days and when they used to send reconveyances. That's the document that they used to show that the loan's been paid off. And they used to send it to the customer for them to record. And sometimes they didn't read the letter. They didn't exactly record it. Sometimes threw it in a box. Sometimes they did a really cool thing and they burnt it because they thought it'd be fun to prove that they paid off their loan.
Don't burn the
Don't
document.
burn the document. But yeah, so we end up there. It's not uncommon for us to go through a box of documents, old documents that say, you know, that the loans have paid off, but, you know, and sometimes they don't have that reconveyance. Sometimes they just have a letter that says that it's unpaid full. And a lot of times these banks are out of business. So we have to go back to whoever has bought them out, you know, down the road. So that gets exciting, and that can take well over 30 days.
Yeah.
So even though your contract says 30 days, that's why it's not a bad gig for you to, you know, open up those preliminary reports in advance, because then we can clean it up and make it easy. So we've gotten down the road, we got a little flat tire, and we had a little blowout, and we did not anticipate these things. So sometimes we have a problematic spouse. They don't want to sign.
California is a community property state. So what that means is whatever is yours is also your spouse's. And when you are purchasing a piece of property, the title company does not have a requirement to have an interspousal deed signed. An interspousal deed is where this one spouse will deed their interest to the other spouse, making it their sole and separate property. We don't have that requirement. We can proceed without a spouse signing. However, most lenders have the requirement of a spouse deeding off on the property so that it is the borrower's sole and separate property. If you are going through if your client is going through a divorce, that means that they're still married until the paperwork is finalized. It doesn't matter if they say that they're separated, they haven't lived together in 10 years, they still are, if they're legally married, the spouse would have to sign off on the property. And we have had dozens of transactions get delayed because a spouse does not want to sign off. We cannot force them to sign.
No. And quite honestly, we don't care if they're in prison. They still have to sign, no matter how you look at it. If you're married, if you're not, how about this? If you're not legally divorced, you're still married. End of story. Yeah. So it gets pretty exciting. So if you have somebody who's coming and you're showing houses to them over and over and over again, guess what? You probably need to ask a question. I know it sounds ridiculous, marital status, but it can kill your deal if you don't ask the question. So it's unfortunate. Low appraisals, we're seeing those. We're not, not
nearly as bad.
Yeah, it's not great sometimes, but it's not bad. So
everybody on the best needs to get along though. So if an appraisal comes in low, it's not we don't have any sort of valuations or anything like that we can compete with an appraiser or anything like that. This is up to the buyer and seller to come to an agreement upon.
Same thing goes with termite reports, home inspections, financing, all that kind of good stuff. Everybody's got to get along on the bus. Yes. Yeah. So, and if not, we kind of have to we got to put on brakes. So sometimes we have to take detours,
route changes.
We got to change direction just a little bit. Those things, basically come down to, if you had a buyer that we needed to add or a buyer that needed to be subtracting. I know what the new contract says. I get it about adding somebody at the last minute. It's still happening. The lenders haven't gotten on board. So you need to have a conversation with that lender about, he's going to be taking title. It's a married man as a sole and separate property. She is not going on title, because we get documents all the time adding somebody. You guys have to, have that conversation with your lenders, because unfortunately it's not something that we have done. They just kind of happen. So if you change lenders, we got to reroute, because we're going to have to give all the information to the new lender. They got to start, processing the loan that way. Anybody's leaving the country,
tell us. If you know that your client is going to be taking,
we can fix that.
If they're going to be going to England and Paris, like our dear friend Christy here went to recently.
I didn't have anything to sign though.
Yeah, but Christy has things in place. She has a trust.
Yeah.
She has the power of attorney.
Yeah.
So that if something needs to be signed while she's away, there are people here who can sign on her behalf.
Yeah. Yeah. Love would be the person that would be signing on my behalf. So if you need something really done well, she can do it for me.
So if someone becomes incapacitated during the transaction, and we actually have had that happen before, or passes away in the middle of the transaction, as long as there's no further documents to sign, we're okay. But the moment that you have something that needs to be signed,
Mhm.
a probate would have to happen.
Mhm.
And that a probate is where we would need for the clients to seek advice from an attorney. They would need to petition to a judge. Someone gets appointed to sign on behalf of that person's estate, and then we get the ball rolling.
That's why it's really important to, if you're going to leave the country, let's have a conversation about that. Trusts save the day a lot of time. Power of attorneys save the day a lot of the time. So we can make things. The ride can still be joyous and happy if you give us all the information. It's when you surprise us 2 days before and things are not in place, and then everybody's stressed out, and the escrow or the ride is not joyous anymore. It's very sad.
Going back to the power of attorney really quickly, I do want to mention that we are able to prepare specific powers of attorney. Specific power of attorney means that it's specific to our transaction for this property that is in escrow. So, and those are acceptable to the lender. We usually prepare the document and send it to the lender for approval first before we get it signed, just to make sure that everyone's on the same page.
Now, and sometimes there are power of attorneys that they tell you that they are in place. We have to have not only the original, because it has to be recorded, but we also have to get it approved by title. Sometimes we have to get it approved by the lender. So just because they're saying that this power of attorney is in place, you immediately need to have it gathered by the title company, and that you can tell us to call them and we can get it, but we have to get it approved. So it's really important, again, that you get this information, but you pass it on to, so we can make sure that it's okay. Just because they say they got it doesn't mean it can be used, unfortunately. Close of escrow dates, we are having that happen left and right lately.
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise, it's closing sooner, but nobody told us. It's a problem.
We're always happy to accommodate to earlier closing dates, but just communicate.
Yeah, so if you can give us a little heads up, we can make sure that the ride is smooth and easy. Again, I'm still a firm believer in my little fantasy land that escrow is fun. It can be, even when things change, it still can be fun. So sometimes we have some restless passengers.
Are we there yet?
No, but are we there yet, Mom? I want to be there yet. That gets really exciting. Or when they like to fight, we like fighting. When your kids are in the back seat and you threaten them that you have to pull the car over and beat them. Yeah. Sometimes we want to do that to real estate agents too. So we wouldn't do it. We'd just think about it, but we wouldn't really do it. But we would think about it. So no.
I'm just gonna interrupt on that point for 1 second, because basically the reason that we have to pull the bus over is we don't make decisions. We are acting by instruction. And so it is the fact that if the instruction isn't clear, we're going to be driving around in circles. So we just have to pull over till everybody figures out where they want us to go.
I like beating the real estate agents better, but whatever. She's the nice one. She takes all the fun out of things, but whatever. So we have that. We have it when people want to cancel.
And we've had transactions cancel. Last week we had one where the buyer got cold feet, and on the day of we had all this money, we had all the loan documents signed, and then he canceled. It happens though. When there are any delays in closings, which happen all the time, it's very rare that we actually have an escrow close on the actual closing date, and delays happen. I think it's always wise to have that conversation with your clients to set the expectation of this is the date that we are aiming for. However, things can happen. We have a file right now where the closing date passed yesterday and immediately a demand to close was issued, which is okay. There's paperwork that has to be signed and delivered to the buyers and sellers and to the lenders in order to help protect all of the clients. But make sure that when you are drawing up any extensions and things like that, to communicate with all the parties that are involved. Sometimes there are problems that arise, and we all just want to get to the end. We all want to get to destination closing. Okay? So when there's delays and hiccups, speed bumps along the way, it happens. But realistic expectations should be set, and communication is very key. If there is a problem, let everybody know. That way, we can all work together in order to come to a resolution.
Right. So, sometimes we get hijacked.
Yes, this is a big one.
Yeah.
So wire fraud continues to be on the rise in our industry. If you have not noticed in all of our emails, in the contract, there's 2 areas in the contract where it gets signed.
If we put you on hold, there's the hold music.
Yes.
That really isn't hold music. It's just advising you that
yes,
wire fraud's on the uprise.
Yes. There's an item that gets signed with our Start in Here module by the buyers and sellers, confirming that they understand wire fraud is on the rise. We just recently had a customer who signed all of these documents within the contract with our escrow paperwork, was on hold several times. I remember him calling in and still managed to send his wire for his closing funds of like $150,000 to the wrong bank account.
Yeah.
Because he received fraudulent wiring instructions.
And did not clarify with the escrow holder that we did not send them that email in the first place. An email had been spoofed. So the bottom line is that we want to be the buyer and seller's best friend. We want them to feel comfortable to pick up the phone and say, hey, I got this email. Did you send it to us? Even if we did send them the email, the bottom line is that we can solve all kinds of problems. Wiring is not the problem. Wiring is not a problem. It's not a bad thing. Where the bad part happens is when people are not in constant communication. So we're best friends. And once they receive the wire instructions, those wire instructions are never, ever going to change. They're always going to be the same.
Correct. So, as an agent, do not ask us for wiring instructions.
No good deed goes unpunished. You don't want to help them out. Let us be responsible for it.
You never want to get in the middle of us sending wire instructions to you and then you forwarding it on to your customer. That is where the breach can happen with the wiring instructions being changed. When that forwarding ends up happening, the instructions need to come from us directly to the customer. We always call the customer to confirm with them that we are sending the instructions. It's always best to give them our contact information as well. They're more than welcome to call our office to confirm that we actually sent the instructions and confirm our account information with anyone who picks up the phone.
Anytime a wire is sent, we want to know, we want to confirm. End of story.
Inquire before you wire.
Yes, and what we're doing is we're encrypting those emails. We're taking some extra precautions to make sure that the instructions that we are sending are received by us or from that, vice versa, all that kind of good stuff. So don't do it. Let us do it.
So once we have all of the bills in our file, once the seller has signed, we've received all of the mortgage information for the seller, ordered payoff statements, dealt with all the solar transfers, we then should be receiving loan documents. This is the last mile, which feels like the absolute longest.
Yes.
And everything can happen very quickly towards the end. Once we receive the buyer's loan documents, we will reach out to a notary and schedule the clients to sign everything. Then they will proceed with bringing in their closing funds. We'll send the documents back to the lender for review. A lot of lenders now will do scanned funding where they don't need the originals, but some lenders do need the originals. So we like to tell clients that usually closing can happen within 3 to 4 days of you signing your loan documents. Sometimes it can happen sooner. And as long as all of the parties on the bus are getting along and it's turning into a party bus at the end, we can proceed with closing the escrow.
So what you guys need to understand is every transaction is different, basically is what it comes down to. Sometimes I can have a customer sign right now and still close their escrow this afternoon. And then there's other times that I can have a customer sign right now, but they're out of the area. And therefore, we won't be closing until Wednesday of next week. So it just depends on the situation and it depends on the circumstances. So we can't quote things like, oh, it'll happen immediately, because we don't know that for sure until we get all of our little duckies in a row. So we got to get things in like the buyer's money. It has to be in the form of a cashier's check or a wire. All the wires go through the Federal Reserve. That can take minutes. That can take
Hours. Sometimes it can take a couple days.
Yes, because, and the reason why it might take a couple days is because we have things like OFAC. So would you like to explain a little bit about
Sure.
OFAC?
So OFAC is where the funds end up getting held by the Treasury Department. If your customer has a very common name, I can use like a Jose Garcia. That's a super common name. That name could potentially be on a list with the government. There's times where the government has to request further information in order to clear the wire to make sure that the money is not being used for bad purposes. So we have to then supply information like mailing address, the customer's nationality, their date of birth, things like that to the bank so that they can proceed with clearing the wire. Again, sometimes that can take a couple of hours. We have had it take a couple of days before. There's nothing that we can do about it. The money has to get here before we can close. There's a lot of times this happens and we try to not have to tell the agents and the lenders everything that is going on, because there's a lot of times where people can't handle the truth.
You can't handle the truth. And so unfortunately, when you can't handle the truth, guess what? We just are, we hustle around on our end to make, again, the trip exciting and entertaining and happy. We don't want to create problems in your transactions, which I think is very funny that a lot of people I have heard, the escrow officer won't close our transaction. Well,
we're in the business of closing escrow.
I'm an escrow officer. I get paid when I close escrows. I don't get paid any other way. Of course I want to close your escrow. So, and really when it comes down to it, we close escrows all the time. We want to make this an enjoyable trip for you guys at the end of the day. So other things that have to happen before we close escrow, we send the documents down. We do one more date down on the property and the customers to make sure that there's no liens against the seller or the property, because again, our job is to clear title and uphold the contract. So we have to clear title for that buyer. Sometimes every now and then, guess what?
A lien comes in.
Oh, we had one back in the day where we dated it down and there was a $2 million lien against the seller for an IRS lien. And you know what? He knew about it. And he didn't want to tell us because he was hoping we wouldn't find it.
But we found it, and our escrow was delayed a month.
Yeah, it wasn't fun, but it closed, but it wasn't good. It wasn't good. It could have been solved, actually. It would have been faster if you would have told us, but whatever. Anyway.
After the date down is done, though, and there's no other liens that are found of record against the buyer, the seller, or the property, then we are able to proceed with recording our documents with the Fresno County Recorder's Office. We record digitally, so there's a system that we scan in the documents too. We're certifying to the county that we have the original document in our possession, and that the copy that was scanned is a certified copy of the true original. So whenever the documents are sent in to be reviewed, the county can reject the documents. They do it all the time.
We don't tell you all the time, by the way.
We don't tell you.
Sometimes you can't handle the truth, but whatever. We do.
And the document could be rejected for a multitude of reasons. The customer could have signed through their name because they have a fancy signature that crosses through the actual printed name. And the notary's stamp could be too light. When we scan in the documents, we do try our best to make the alterations before the county reviews it so that we avoid any potential rejections, but sometimes it happens. Sometimes the rejection happens on a Friday before a 3-day weekend. And unfortunately, it happens, and we try our best to avoid those situations, but the county does have the final say. Once the document is actually recorded, that is when title gets transferred over to the buyer's name, and we disperse the file. Dispersing the file means that we are going to go through and review the contract again. We're going to go through all of the bills in our file. We're going to double check the title report. We're going to double check our emails to see if there's anything that we were missing, and then we proceed with cutting the checks. This can take some time. So when we have a dozen closings, we need a little bit of time to be able to get the closings done and disperse all of the money to the client.
But here's the deal. If you guys, again, tell us there's an emergency, right? Somebody needs the money because we're transferring it to another escrow. Somebody needs the money because they're leaving the state. Somebody needs them. As long as you communicate these things with us, guess what?
we can accommodate.
we can meet your expectations. It's when we don't know what the problem, that there is another thing going on, we need to know all the information. So you know what, you promised them a story. Which story? You promised them a story about solar.
Oh yes, I will tell my solar story.
Okay, we're gonna tell you. So sit back, everyone.
So
Grab a drink.
last week we had a customer who reached out to, actually, let me back up. I reached out to a solar company and I provided them with the final deed in order to finalize the solar transfer. I received an email from the solar company saying that the transfer paperwork actually had not been executed yet. So I sent a message to the agents and I said, hey, there's this paperwork that the solar company sent to your clients. Please ask them to sign. Then a couple days later, I followed up with the solar company. The clients hadn't signed it yet. So then I had reached out again to the agents and we sent him a copy of the document that was being signed. And it turned out that the panels actually were supposed to be owned. It was not a lease agreement that was supposed to be transferred over. So long story short, we had a really fun time chasing down $13,000 from this seller. Luckily, they were able to bring it in, but the agent had said to us that his client told him that the solar panels were owned, but there was no documentation to show that they were owned. And we didn't know this part of the information either. It was disclosed on the MLS listing that the panels were owned. We don't have access to MLS. We don't know this unless someone tells us what's happening with the panels. We wouldn't have known that they were supposed to be owned and we were paying them off through escrow. Had we known that, we would have taken care of it ahead of time. So this is another reason why it's very important to communicate, especially with solar, what is happening with the panels. The moment that you see panels on the home, send us an email and say, hey, this is what's happening. And then we can document our file and make sure that before we close, that everything has been dialed in with the solar panel and solar company.
So at the end of the day, I will tell you that the agents that were involved in this transaction were kind of amazing. Nobody started fighting with one another. We all got on the bus together and we were coming up with a solution. So that right there, again, bad situation, still a great outcome. And it can be, things happen. And I cannot stress that enough that, in an escrow transaction, a lot of things can happen. If I get asked one more time, what can go wrong? You don't want to know all the things that can go wrong. But I do want you guys to know that we close escrows all the time, like a lot of them. And when you close a lot of escrows, that means that you can overcome a lot of hurdles, especially when everybody's working together to get that job done. It's when you have the fighting or the pointing of fingers or the throwing under the bus.
Don't throw your escrow people under the bus.
Don't throw anybody under the bus.
Or
really.
the lender or the other agent. Yeah. We all want to get to the destination safely.
Yeah, I think that we're all on the same bus together. And so that it can be still, even in bad times, it can be like if you're hungry or you have to go to the bathroom on the bus. Well, not on the bus, but you have to go to the bathroom, and then it gets to be a problem. Don't do that. Everyone can get along. So it's like, yeah, look, we've arrived. And we're happy, and escrow is closed. And hopefully, at the end of the day, our goal is to make sure that everybody's happy, everybody has their money. Our goal is to make sure that really we don't have to talk about this escrow ever again because we're getting referrals from it because it was such an enjoyable ride on the bus. So, and it's time, and at the end of the day,
Christy, one of the things we didn't put in the presentation that I just realized can cause some challenges is working with the HOAs. So could you guys share a little bit about some best ways to keep that going?
Yes. So we have Sierra on our team is just absolutely amazing with HOAs. The moment that she sees an address, that she can tell if it's in an HOA or not. It's quite miraculous how she does it.
She's the HOA whisperer.
But whenever we have, that could be another one of the pieces of information that is provided ahead of time. If you know that there's an HOA, let us know ahead of time, and then we can get those documents ordered right away.
HOAs are not fast.
Yes, so some of the HOA companies, they can take 7 to 10 days to process our requests. There's a couple of companies now that go through HomeWise docs, and that company requires an upfront fee. That fee can be anywhere from like $400 to, we just had one recently where it was $900 that the customer had to pay upfront in order to have those HOA
And
documents
so you
released.
kind of have to prepare your customer that there are going to be potentially fees that have to be paid in advance prior to closing escrow. You know, some people are not prepared for that. I had a lady just the other day call, and she was freaking out because she did not have $500 that she could pay for the HOA paper. She just wasn't expecting it. You know, so the bottom line is that these HOA companies, they require it. There's no way around it. You can beg, you can plead. They're not going to give up their documents unless they get paid. And the bottom line is that we can't close an escrow unless the buyer gets the HOA papers and reviews them. So it's this vicious cycle that we gotta pay it so we can get the documents, you know, to the buyer. Unfortunately, because these, you know, HOA companies are taking longer to get these documents out. If you see an HOA, guess what? I would sit there and go, I think I'm going to open up a preliminary report in advance because I know what my contract says. And it says that I have 7 days to get all my documents to the buyer. And I know that that HOA company is not going to take 7 days. They're going to take more like 2 weeks. Then people get mad.
And when you pre-open your escrows, that's another thing that we can do as well. We can order the HOA documents ahead of time for you and your client.
Yep.
Any other questions?
So at this point, because we don't have questions backed up in the chat, if anybody wanted to unmute and ask these ladies anything about challenges you've had or how to handle certain instances, you're welcome to do that. And I'm going to stop sharing. All right. I guess you guys did such a fantastic job that everybody is just soaking it all in and doesn't have any questions for you.
So if you guys do have questions down the road, Love and I are accessible. You are more than welcome to give us a call at any time. We'd be happy to answer anything that we got going on here. Yeah. So.
All right. Well,
Informative. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Along with the recording, we will be sending out link to a brand new guide to title and escrow that we have for you and your clients. It's designed to be a flip book that they can just look through on screen. But we can also, upon request, if you'd like us to send you a PDF that's more of a booklet that you can send them, we are happy to send that as well, because we know that this journey can be a little bit confusing. And as the ladies just explained to you, there's a lot of different things that can happen. So we believe that by educating people and being as upfront and transparent as possible with all of this information, the better experience that everybody can have. Your sales team, these ladies, our other professional escrow officers throughout the branches, we are here for you. We want every journey to be as smooth and fun as possible. So again, have an amazing Friday, and we're, just let us know if you need anything. That recording will be sent out sometime today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye for now.
Bye.